Darren?
Okay, I think you're turning it over to me. Am I right?
Yeah, I guess so. I think I sent out the agenda in advance, and we'll hear more on Benson next month when after they're done with the negotiations and they have a better understanding of what Benson's status is. So I thought that was appropriate to go ahead and defer it. Hopefully all of you can squeeze another meeting in. I know you're all, many of you are probably pretty busy. So I actually use as an opportunity to throw in a couple of other topics this evening that we haven't had a chance to chat about. So, hopefully you've had a chance to look at the charter, the new charter, and read some of the comments in advance. Hopefully that'll help keep the meeting moving along a little quicker, since people have already started sharing some of their thoughts. So we guess we need to start with introductions, right? So for the benefit of those people who are in the audience, I'm Tom Peterson. I'm the co-chair of the BAC on my 9th year in this role. Kenichi, you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Kenichi Onyagasi, and I am the co-chair. It is my 3rd month in this role. It's good to be here. Norm, do you want to go next?
Sure. Norm Dowdy, and I've been on the bond committee for about 1.5 years now. So it's just always amazing how much work is being done on our schools. It's a great program. Darren?
Hello, everybody. My name is Darren Golden. My pronouns are he, him, and just a BAC member. I think I've been on for about 1 year now, maybe a little under. Stephen?
Are you thinking Angela?
Yeah. I did mean Angela. I just read it as Stephen, then I was like, it's too late.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm sharing computers just to confuse you. I'm Angela. I'm the Executive Director of Northwest Disability Support. I've been an advocate around bond issues for 14 years, bringing up issues of ADA accessibility particularly, and universal design. So really interested in the intersections of race and disability and access for all students, and glad to be on Bac.
Dick, you want to go next?
Sure. Dick Steinberge. I'm a BAC member, just concluding my 3rd year on the BAC, and I'm a proud Oregon State Beaver, especially after last Saturday.
Yeah, Dick. I'll go. Greg DiLoretto, BAC member, 1.5 years. Franklin High School class of 1971 and an OSU grad 1975.
I think that's all the BAC members. So, Marina, you want to introduce the other folks?
Yes, actually, I think my staff I will let introduce themselves as they do their presentations, but I am Marina Cresswell. I'm the Senior Director of the Office of School Modernization. And Dan, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Absolutely. Good to see everyone. I'm Dan Young, Chief Operating Officer.
There he is.
Okay. Ready to move forward?
Sure.
All right. I did put an agenda up there. There's one additional item that I am going to cover that you will see slides on, and it is not on the agenda. It was based on some of the questions that that the BAC members had sent out prior to the meeting. I am going to do just as quick as I can a discussion of contingency and estimate at completion. just to kind of make it clear to all of our BAC members what we're talking about when we talk about those things, the usage that we have for those terms, how they relate to the work that we do. So that will be coming. Before I do that, though, I am going to start with the program updates. And I do want to note that there were no public comments received prior to the start of the meeting. If we receive any after the start, we will be sure to share them with you electronically by email. So just a couple quick notes on the program data that you see here. Our equity numbers are up slightly. As you know, they do fluctuate, so we're always hoping that this will be a positive trend over the long term, but they are up this time around. For 2012, you're going to notice that we are still estimating to use all of our contingency at the completion of the program. That large amount of contingency, that is actually set aside to provide funding for the Grant Upper Field Improvement Project that is budgeted and is also set aside to provide some funding for what we anticipate will be additional budget needs. So we will talk about that a little bit more when you do the presentation for the Grant Upper Field Improvement. But that amount of money is intended to cover Grant Upper Fields. For 2017 and 2020, just a couple quick notes. There's not significant changes. One change that you will see there is we are forecasting use of essentially all of our contingency at this point. That is really just intended to reflect that the Benson project was budgeted but not fully funded in 2017. So with that understanding, any additional funding that we have at the end of the 2017 program is going to go towards funding the budget in Benson. It's a somewhat fluid situation between the 2017 and the 2020 as far as the completion of the 2017 program. But of course, all of the funds that we have left in 2017 that are not otherwise allocated should end up going towards fulfilling that budget need with Benson. So just to kind of clarify, when you think of budget, you can think of it as the authority to spend money. When you think of funding, you can think of it as the cash, the funding, the money itself. So they are two different things. We can have authority to spend money without having the cash in hand to back it up. And so that's what you're seeing the interplay of there. We do have money that was put towards the MPG to cover the entire MPG project in the 2020 bond. We are in the process of shifting those 2020 funds into the MPG project. But because we're partway through that shift, it is a bit of a process. We've already used 2017 funds for MPG to get it started. So now we need to change all of those expenses over to 2020 funds and shift the 2017 funds out of the project. So for now, you will still see the 2017 looks like it is over budget. That reflects the Benson MPG full amount that was already over. And the 2020 will look like it's being spent. So just to understand, we have not made that shift yet, but we are actually in the process of doing so. Just we're trying to get through that. I would like to talk a little bit about some of the things that I had in my program notes. I don't need to go into the staffing unless you have specific questions. That was really just a quick update for you. Yes, Dick?
I guess I need to apologize. I did not find any of these slides in the materials when I clicked on the link. Were they there?
I don't think they were there when you clicked on the link. The But the presentation, so each of the status reports, whether it's the bond program or the modernizations, they all get uploaded as separate PDFs to that link. After you sent your email, I realized that the bond program status update had not been uploaded. So I uploaded it. I did notify Tom and Kenichi. I don't know that I copied everybody on that.
I thought you did, but.
Well, this is kind of difficult because I can't even read it on the screen and I haven't had any time to review it. So anyway, you can continue, I guess.
I understand that. The materials are always available for you to ask questions after the meeting as well. This isn't the only forum in which to ask questions about the materials that are being provided.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess you didn't. My apologies, Dick. I didn't pass that on to you when Marina notified me. So I dropped the ball there. Sorry.
So one of the things that I would like to note, obviously there are a number of new staffing things that we're working on. We will continue to work through those. Adding the 2020 bond to the program has created need for additional staffing in a number of different ways, and so you'll continue to see staffing updates on a semi-regular basis. Angela?
I just wondered, is it possible on your screen for you to just expand it a little to help with the visibility?
I actually can't because it's in presentation mode in PowerPoint. It's a technological issue that I have with my screen setup, my monitor setup. The notes, if you go to the link that's in the invite, the bond status update report is in there and you can download it. So you can follow along as a PDF. I am going to go over the pandemic impacts, which is the second section on these notes. I do want to talk about that very specifically because we have talked in the past about isolated impacts. We've talked a little bit about market volatility, but I don't know if you've been really reading all of the many articles that are starting to come through about the continued impacts of the pandemic. What we've seen is that it has moved from a volatility situation to an actual market distortion, which is really much more long-term. And we're seeing it comprehensively across multiple areas. It is affecting at this point, I would say, probably all of our projects to some degree or another. And so I did want to kind of note that there are a number of different impacts that are related to the pandemic, and I want to talk about those impacts specifically. First of all, we are seeing delays in materials. So if you have heard about supply chain delays, we are most definitely seeing those delays in materials. Sometimes that can impact our schedule, which then becomes a cost impact as well. Sometimes those materials are so delayed that they're no longer available for us. So they are not going to arrive during the period of our construction. And we have to scramble to find an alternate material and address whatever design issues come up with that. Those are also impacting our projects. That tends to be a cost impact. It can also be a schedule impact. We're seeing that those materials cost more. So shipping costs have gone up. I recently saw an indication that the cost of shipping a freight container from Asia to the West Coast has gone up to 4 times what it was last year. These are significant cost increases, and those are being passed on to us as well. We're seeing labor shortages. Labor shortages in part because people are getting sick. So there are shortages from that. We have seen that when we are implementing things like vaccination requirements for working within our school sites, that our contractors may not have enough laborers who are vaccinated to do the work. And so they're having to shift crews around, or they're having to do work when students are not present. So that, of course, has impacts to us as well. We've also seen a cost escalation in labor because there are shortages. We pay more. So I want to be really upfront about it. I want to be really explicit about it. These impacts are out there. They are definitely starting to impact us more and more. And we are seeing that. We have pushed some projects back from this summer to next summer, or phases of projects have been pushed out to next summer because we could not get materials in time to complete prior to the start of school, or because materials simply weren't available, and we've got to rethink how we're going to do the work. And it's showing up not just on our summer projects, but on our modernizations as well. Norm?
If I remember right, in a prior meeting, there was some comment or about federal funds via the state, I guess, perhaps going to be available to offset some of these costs. Am I remembering correctly?
I'm actually going to push that question to Dan if he's available.
Yeah, it's a good question, Norm. It did come up, and I apologize. I did need to track that down. We've been tracking our funds that are specific to, as Brina notes, to pandemic costs, and have been providing them to our financial team. The last update I got was they really weren't there yet as far as requesting any funds specific for construction impacts. But I will make a note, and I will follow up here within the next week or so of any new information.
I will say it's probably going to be much more challenging for us to specifically call out some of these soft impacts. So being able to identify what is a cost impact specific to the pandemic in a material cost escalation.
Aren't the contractors identifying that? And I mean, projects ongoing, they would provide a change order and identify.
They're going to identify that the cost has escalated. They're going to tell us why they think it is, but there is nothing that says the pandemic is specifically responsible. And so those are the parts that become very challenging when you ask for cost reimbursement.
Okay.
To the extent that we can, we absolutely will. But at this point, that path is not yet clear.
Okay. Yeah. Hopefully, it'll be possible and significant, but maybe not. Thanks.
A couple of other project notes. We have started design work for next summer's projects. We are trying to get a jump on this so that we can have as much exposure as possible for better bid coverage. We are also trying to more actively reach out to other organizations to advertise the projects that are coming up. We will be participating in the OAMI virtual trade show in October. We will be reaching out to other organizations as well, but again, trying to get to contractors that we haven't necessarily seen well represented in our projects in the past. Any questions on the program update before I move on to contingency and estimated completion? Okay. So we use the term contingency quite a bit when we're talking about our status updates. Contingency is essentially a bucket of money within the project budget that's been set aside for unanticipated needs. We have 4 buckets, if you will, 4 primary buckets of money within the project. I put this up on the screen. So cost of construction, which is essentially our hard construction costs. Professional services, which is where things like your design team would fall. Owner costs, that means things like fees or permits, furniture, insurance, those types of things, and then contingency. You can think of these as the first 3 buckets are kind of like checking accounts. The 4th bucket, the contingency bucket, is really more like a savings account. The money is set aside. You don't currently anticipate needing it, but you have it there in case something comes up that you do need it for. That contingency bucket can be split into smaller buckets, and you will hear us talk about each of these 3 different types: project contingency, owner or design contingency, and contractor contingency. When we're talking about a hard bid project or a lump sum project, the only one we have for that is project contingency. That essentially says we have set aside a savings account for any kind of project and unanticipated need, whether it's additional costs for the design team, or it's additional costs for the construction, or it's maybe additional furniture that we weren't anticipating. That's project contingency. When we talk about a CMGC contract, we have 2 additional types. We have owner contingency and contractor contingency, as well as the project contingency. Project contingency goes through the life of the project. We take some of that money and put it inside the contractor's contract. That money inside the contract can be owner or contractor. There are very specific items that each of those 2 types can be used for. So if it's an owner contingency or a design, it's things like design errors and omissions, unforeseen conditions, changed conditions, code-related changes, acceleration because of something that's not caused by the contractor, scope changes at the owner's request. In order to use that money within the contractor's contract, the owner has to agree to it. In other words, we have to approve the use of owner contingency. We also have to approve the use of contractor contingency. That can be used for different things. Overruns and buyout, overruns in time and material work, acceleration or schedule recovery that wasn't caused by us or by weather delays, replacement of subs, damage done by other trades. There's a very specific list in the contract that identifies the things that this can be used on as well. Greg, would you like me to finish the contingency discussion before you ask your question, or is...
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
Okay. Within eBuilder, project contingency as a bucket cannot have any commitments, meaning a contract, or any expenses put against it. So it is truly like a savings account. You can't put any expenses on that. If a project team wants to use project contingency, it has to be moved to one of those other cost categories. And moving it requires approval from OSM leadership. When we report contingency on the reports, we are reporting all of the buckets. So project, owner, and contractor contingency are all being reported on tonight's reports. It is not a forecast. It is actually a report of the money available in that bucket at the time that the data was pulled from eBuilder. So it's the money in the savings account. It does not include pending commitments, anticipated commitments, or risk items. Before I go on to estimate at completion, Greg? Okay. The estimate at completion is a forecast of the project's final cost. We do our estimates at completion within eBuilder. We forecast all 4 of those buckets or cost categories within the project. That forecast does include taking into consideration pending commitments, meaning they've been submitted but not fully approved yet, anticipated commitments. Contractors told us there will be more costs, but we haven't actually seen anything submitted yet. Or risk items. The team has talked about a potential risk, but they're still kind of working through how they're going to mitigate or abate, and they have not put a cost to it yet. So they are coming up with a wrong amount. and considering that as they do their forecast. Teams will typically forecast conservatively to use all of their budget, including the contingency, until construction is complete. Because it's hard to know what you might need from that savings account due to unanticipated needs. After the school has opened, that is when the team starts to spend much more time reviewing potential additional project-related costs or follow-up projects based on the actual use of the space. And we've talked about this before. Sometimes we have these projects that need to clean up something that was not anticipated until the space actually got used. We have processes in place to address projected cost overruns at checkpoints during design. Anytime we anticipate that a project is going to need to increase its budget, we have significant internal review of the conditions. We're talking through risk mitigation strategies. We're talking about potential funding sources. We're having conversations with district leadership. Ultimately, if it's a significant change to the budget, then there will be a board approval for that as well. While that review is going on and while we're going through all of that discussion in detail about the project, we're going to notify you that we have budget concerns, but we're not going to change the estimate of completion to forecast over budget until we have adequate substantiation of the forecasted costs. We're not going to put a number out there that we don't feel we can support. So you will find sometimes you will see that an EAC forecasts under budget. Usually that is after the school has opened and we've been able to kind of sit down, align all of our costs, look at what minor things still need to be done, and feel comfortable that we are not going to use all of the money that was set aside for that project. Sometimes you will see that an EAC is over budget. At that point, though, we have already had substantiation of what that cost is going to be. We have already talked about whether there's any way to mitigate it, and we've already talked about what the funding source could be for that. Most of the time, what you're going to see is that the project is EAC is going to show it is on budget. Questions? Dick?
Go ahead, Dick.
Okay, I thought you were going to jump in, so I stopped. I guess I just have a fundamental problem with that approach of how the estimate at completion is presented. I don't see how the BAC can have a feel for whether a project is financially in trouble or not if these numbers aren't reconciled to reality until after the school opens. In my experience, the way to do this is for the project managers to do the forecasted EAC at each reporting period, taking into account all the things you talked about, known changes, pending changes, risks that haven't even been fully quantified yet with at least the best guess. Sometimes a probability factor is used on some of the things that haven't been quantified yet to sort of do a mathematical adjustment of that. But if I can't see the actual best estimate from the project manager as to what the EAC is compared to the amount of funding available, I cannot tell the board whether the project is in trouble or not financially. That just doesn't work for me.
I'm going to jump. Oh, Norm, go ahead then.
I think this ties in somewhat to this. I know in the past there's been mention of a risk log where the project managers actually track the pending commitments, anticipated risk items. And I think those are things that, I don't know how that ties into the EAC, Because I think that's what Dick's getting at, is if those items that are being tracked aren't brought into the process. I don't know, my 40 years of experience on large commercial projects, I'm with Dick as far as projected outcome reports is pretty typical. And I think maybe, I don't know if you're doing those internally, then using the risk log would be my question.
We have significant discussions every month on all of our projects to review where their costs are, along with all of the other many details that are related to the cost of the project. So we are having those discussions. There is far more detail in every project than we could potentially share with you.
And those are the items that live in the risk log.
There are items living in risk logs. That is one piece of the data.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. Getting to Dick's comment, I think it's confusing to include the report the contingency that's in the contract along with the program contingency. I can understand where the project managers will likely want to forecast using up all of the contingency that's in the contract. I get that. But when you show contingency as a mix of what's in the contract and what's outside the contract, it's very confusing when you're forecasting to understand how much of the contingency are you really going to need to complete the contract over and above what's in the, so to me, I find that somewhat confusing for us, particularly given we appreciate and understand that you have all these processes in place to make sure everything's being scrutinized. But if you look back at our charter and we're trying to understand where things are going, combining those contingency just creates confusion in my mind and does give me a real good picture of where the project is headed. So I appreciate an estimated completion, as Norm and Dick alluded to, where it's the best. It's not, no, we're going to spend all. It's a guess that no, we think we're going to spend more, or no, we think we're going to spend less. And that the contingency that we're seeing and managing is a contingency that's not in the contract. You guys manage that. That's your job. That's your role. But to try to explain how the project's doing with those two mixed together in reporting is very, very confusing for me. So that would be my only thought, that I think it would better for us to understand if you didn't bucket inside contract and outside contract contingencies together. At least that's how you portray it in the slides. So that, right or wrong.
Right or wrong. Certainly happy to change which contingency buckets we are reporting. I'm not sure they actually will tell you much of the story. I think you're going to get more of that from the information from the project notes, as far as what the risks are and what people are following and the concerns.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I just know when you're sharing a project contingency, when you showed those program contingencies, and that's including all the contingencies that you're carrying in contracts, that's somewhat misleading, because it's not really the contingency that you have if the contract's going to go over. And so that's where I'm getting at when you share them as one contingency. It doesn't it's a little misleading in my mind as to how the overall project is doing. But maybe the others feel differently, but that's just my reaction.
I think some of this is probably going to tie back to the discussion on the charter. And so I think if it's all right, Dan?
I didn't mean to cut you off, Marina. I was just going to say, I think we can take it back and look at this and see if we can find a happy medium. And Tom, you may remember this and everyone else may not. For the first number of years, the way that we forecasted, the way that each project updated the forecast every month as they do now, but any contingency was not included in the estimate at completion. And so it's kind of the reverse of how we're doing it now. That caused a lot of consternation as well, because the feedback was, so you're starting out your project right from the beginning and you're forecasting under budget. So you say you're going to come in under budget. And the answer would be like, no, we still think we're going to use that contingency. Well, you don't show using that contingency. So there's a lot of talk about removing funds. We'd say, well, no, we need those funds. We plan on using those funds, but we don't show them the estimate at completion. So it was an interesting, similar conversation, but sort of the reverse. And so we changed our estimating to show contingency use. When we start a project in the estimate completion, and then began to provide detail on contingency. And then that became more detail and more detail and more detail, to where I think it's become very confusing. So I think we might be able to find a happy medium in here, where we're really clear about what our estimate completion is, and if we give some information about the contingency, what that is. It might not be the contingency that's in the budget. It might be a delta between budget and estimate completion or something like that. But I think we can work on finding that sweet spot.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Marina, it kind of, for me, it does go back to the charter a bit. It's making sure I understand the information is presented in a way where I can say to the board, yeah, they're managing it. The project's doing well. And when you combine them, for me, it creates some confusion. So I don't know, I'll let others chime in as well. I don't know if we're, or perhaps it might be useful for some of the newer members that are kind of new to this to hear their perspective on what makes sense to them, as opposed to us folks in the industry and kind of used to a certain way of seeing things. I think that would be helpful as well. So I don't know if Darren or Kenichi or Angela, any of you have any thoughts. Would be nice to hear what your perspective is. If it makes sense to you and you get it and you're fine, then that'd be good to know.
I think for me, I'm interested in being guided by best practices and what's worked in the relationship between the contractors and where the money lies. So I was interested in what you'd expressed, Dick. Just what is there that is clear that can be communicated, and what is the expectation about that information from the folks that are doing the work on the ground? It seemed like a very relevant point to me.
And I would kind of agree with what Angela just said. These are real costs to a lot of contractors, and the escalations are real. Yeah, it's a little hard, I think, as I think of the trickle effect on some of these things for the subcontractors on it, but I'd like to see kind of that happy medium, and I don't know enough to say either way, but best practices on this would be helpful.
Thank you.
We are.
Any other thoughts or comments? Or we want to keep moving on because we're going a little long here.
Yes, I think it'd be good if we go ahead and go through the project updates, and then the BAC charter discussion will come after that.
Okay.
Just as a reminder of our status definitions, for right or for wrong, these are the current definitions. This is what it's based on. It may not necessarily be what you want to see. And we are certainly open to discussion about those definitions, but these are included every time. Happy to share this with you again separately if you would like to talk about how those are defined. Because we are following them strictly with these project status updates in terms of the colors that you see on the dashboard for each project status. So, Kellogg project, Mr. Efros.
Thank you, Marina. Again, introducing myself, my name is Steve Efros. I'm the Senior Project Manager for the Kellogg project. And I'll quickly go through the status and then some of the notes that follow. In terms of the status, with the completion of construction having occurred, we're about $2 million under budget, so we're very happy about that. On the equity front, while we have very high levels of equity participation through our consultant team, unfortunately we have low levels through the general contractor, and so that's an area we want to kind of explore, certainly in the context of a hard bid process. In terms of schedule, the project was on schedule with completion and transition process having completed prior to the start of school. I'll quickly go through the notes. Oh, sorry, can you back up for?
You can go ahead and go through the notes.
Oh, my own notes, okay.
Steve, we're not including them in the presentation slides, but they were provided as part of the reports.
Okay, great. Yeah, so you can go to the photos that'll kind of illustrate some of it. With construction complete, with all of the fixtures and furnishings and equipment and technology installed in the building and the systems tested and commissioned prior to the start of school, and as you can see, the grand opening here. We're also, again, working on completion of the transition and turnover process from the OSM department to maintenance and operation department. And again, obviously, one of the big accomplishments was obviously the grand opening and the start of school. A really great occasion, I think, for everyone, for the district and the community and students and staff to just celebrate the opening of this new school in Southeast Portland. So we were really, really happy with that event. And really actually kind of blown away by community participation. So that was really rewarding, I think, for everyone. Again, just happy about the budget coming in, or completing the project under budget. I also touched a little bit in my notes on just the energy efficiency performance, just being really, I think, proud of the accomplishment there in terms of achieving very high standards for efficiency, some of which actually will kind of become the new standards going forward for PPS. And then also you could actually advance to the next photos. And then a little bit beyond, I think we have some interior shots. Yes, you can see a little bit of the main stair and just almost the entry to the combined performing arts and gymnasium. And I just wanted to mention just the accomplishment there, just I think particularly with the new program and staff and students already using that space. I think just people, feeling really impressed with the performance of those spaces. And we obviously designed it to work as well as possible as this combined space, but really happy to hear the feedback that we're getting from staff and students. In terms of risks, I would say obviously with the completion of the project, we're looking really at one particular outstanding item, which is not on the site but off site. It has to do with part of the public works improvements on Powell. We have a school speed zone that's been established, but we're still negotiating with the city on a flashing beacon system that will kind of really advertise this more directly to the community and people using Powell. So it's been a bit of a tricky process. It was handed over from ODOT to PBOT, so we're just working through that over the coming weeks. But hopefully we can wrap that up and finalize the equipment and install that within the next few months. There is temporary signage up, so for the time being, we can I think feel good about that. Yes, I guess a question from.
Hi there, Sandra.
Oh, yeah.
And I just had a question.
Angela, yeah.
What's the lighting like at that crosswalk? Because I've just been noticing as I've been coming home and it's been darker that like there was a pedestrian I could hardly see crossing the road. You've talked about the flashing light, which is great. Is there, how would you describe the lighting? Is that satisfactory? Because we're going to have kids, you know, as the winter comes here dealing with, it's a nasty road. So just interested to hear what's been done with lighting as well as the flashing.
Well, yeah, definitely lighting. Well, partly it follows, for better or worse, it follows essentially ODOT standards because it's currently a state highway. But some of the improvements we could make locally at the intersection in particular have to do with adjusting the timing of the stoplight to allow more time for pedestrian crossings. We also did a lot of clearing of trees that are directly in front of the school so that vehicles could more easily see pedestrians getting ready to cross. So I think within the zone that we could sort of control, we really tried to, maximize safety.
Any additional questions on Kellogg?
I just want to congratulate Stephen on that project. I had a chance to see his beautiful facility. Really did a nice job. Other than the contracting piece, but hard bids are always tough. But overall, really impressive. Nice work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Jesse? Please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jessie Steiger. I'm the Senior Project Manager in charge of the McDaniel renovation. I am also proud to say that we are open and we finished on time. Everything's going fantastic. And we're also within budget. With the pandemic, I got a Marina transferred in about $2 million to help cover COVID costs out of the program. But right now I'm projecting that I will be able to return that. We just got today, actually, about $500,000 from the Energy Trust of Oregon for all of the energy incentives that they have. They said it's the largest check they've cut this year. So we're pretty pleased with that. And so I think at the end of the day, the budget's going to be, once we transfer that $2 million back, the budget will be awfully close, but I still believe I'll be under budget. We've got a couple things to add, like Marina mentioned. Once you start using the building, we realize, this spot we need a couple more security cameras. We need a couple more PA speakers to have the whole system covered. So we're still working through some things like that. So budget schedule are great. Equity has not been good on this project, and we've known that for the last 2 years. So that has not really improved. This says 12%. The other thing I have says it's closer to 13%. So it's low, but we're not really able to increase it at this point. Tom.
Oh, I was just curious, being a former energy guy, what the energy credits were for.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Let me try and remember. So a lot of it
You don't
has to
remember,
do.
you can send me a note later. It's fine.
We had there's a person that comes out and does a whole inspection of it too. And I met the guy, but I handed him off to the commissioning agent and she walked around with him. So I think, it's a lot to do with our, we have a 290 kilowatt solar array. So that's a big part of it.
Okay.
Our VRF mechanical system is also very energy efficient. So I believe that's also a piece of it. I honestly don't know the details. I did, however, happily cash their check.
Well, we'll get a chance to see it soon, I hope, to see all the improvements. So
Yeah.
I'll learn more then.
Yeah, great.
Thanks.
And then so maybe you could, I've got a couple pages of some photos next. So there's the last aerial shot with the grand opening just last weekend? It was on the 18th. Tons of people. We're getting really just fantastic feedback about the renovation. The principal says it's the best school he's ever been in. And he said they're also noticing performance improvements from the kids. Like there's fewer fights, there's fewer instances of vandalism, like just people are behaving better, which is really interesting anecdotally. And I'd like to see how it translates into, tests and graduation rates and stuff in the future. So there's some of the big main spaces. It was really nice when teachers started using the building on the very first day when they had to do breakout groups. They immediately moved into that courtyard and sat on the grass and started, doing all of their teacher planning together. So that worked out nice. Next slide. We've got, here's more of our spaces. We got the community partner space is also being really well used. It's really great to see kids studying in the flex spaces. I kind of feel like when we present that idea to some teachers, they don't understand how those spaces will get used. And it has naturally worked out really well. And they're used all throughout the day. So that's been really fantastic to see. And then I've also been hearing from a couple facilities folks. They thought the transition to getting the school operational, like Kellogg, that these projects have gone much better than previous years. So I think OSM and FAM as a team are learning how to do all of this better together and more smoothly. And Steve and I and our whole teams, we traded a lot of information through that just to make sure we were doing all the right things, involving the right people at the right times. So that's going great. And I think there's one more slide. Nope, just kidding, there's not. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, one more good piece of news is regarding the energy incentives. So for modernizations, we shoot for LEED silver, but we have enough points. We actually submitted for LEED gold. So that still has to get approved. It's just barely over the gold mark. So it's always possible the USGBC will reject some of our points, but we're pretty optimistic that we're going to end up with gold. Norman.
Just curious, who I'm trying to remember, who was the architectural firm and who is a contractor on the project?
Sure, the architect is led by Opsis Architecture, and they have a partner of Dow Architects, and the contractor is Fortis.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So,
Norm, we're also including that on the project status reports in the upper right corner of the status report. We did hear that from the BAC members that they wanted to be able to find that information easily. So it's there. I don't know if you can find it easily, but it's there.
Any other questions for McDaniel? Yes.
I just wanted to comment that I went to the grand opening on whatever that date was in September, and it was quite moving. And in fact, the comments were quite moving, and even the chair to pass sang a song in her comments, which was quite amazing. And the school looks amazing, and I think you guys did a great job. So it really turned out well.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. It was it's hard to do all that work in a pandemic. I know we all have jobs to do and pivoted, but So it was really nice to have all the positive response. I think we needed some some good news there at the end. Is it Angela, I think?
Yeah, I just wondered, I really appreciate that we've seen schools that have been historically underserved and had problems being modernized. I wonder if in the slides and in at the opening of these new schools, it'd be great to see somebody in a wheelchair and to just kind of flag up so that I have those positive stories to take back to community about the accessibility that is also created in the ADA compliant new builds. So I'm just going to make that request that in amongst our celebration, could we include something that shows that, because I think it's just really great for the visibility and just the awareness, but also that I'm celebrating that we have another space that is now open to people with disabilities. Thank you.
That's a good point, Angela. Our communications manager, David Main, takes lots and lots of photos at these grand openings and also while the school is in use afterwards. So we will look through our photos to see what we can find, and we'll definitely share those with you directly, but we'll also try to create a better focus on that in our future slide decks.
Yeah, and also on the invitations, if there are prominent people in the disability community that could be great ambassadors and are certainly ready to celebrate this with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom? You're muted. Tom, you're muted.
Sorry. I was going to feed off of the earlier their comments as well. I think as you promote the schools and you show the pictures, I think it's good to, it's nice to see the finished product and how it works. But I think to Angela's point, I think it's also nice to see how it works for everybody, as well as what are some unique features. You know, the LEED Gold, that's a nice accomplishment as well, and to kind of highlight some of these other things that project accomplished besides the traditional bricks and mortars is probably a really good way of presenting the projects going forward. I also want to comment on, I really thought tonight was going to be a conversation about, okay, McDaniel's in trouble financially, how are we going to deal with it? When in fact, it worked out okay. So I was a bit concerned going into this, knowing that you had a number of challenges, weather, COVID, and that the project was, you weren't sure. So I'm delighted to hear that you were able to work through it all and not really need to increase the budget like you thought. So well done. Nice job.
Thank you. Yeah, I almost, for my team, I almost tried to write a lyric update to "We Didn't Start the Fire" by Billy Joel through all of the all the things we survived. And I decided, at the end of the day, I'm not that creative. But we are within budget, so I'm super happy with that. Math I can do, apparently. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate that. Moving on to Lincoln. Eric?
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm the Senior Project Manager for the Lincoln High School Replacement Project. So here's our status update. We're kind of holding steady in the caution column, as you can see. From a budget standpoint, we're actually really close to just being as planned. If you look in the line below, we're just at 47% complete. So after this next pay app that we approve, we'll be 50% complete, and our contingency remaining there is around 8%. And so actually at the next reporting, then we should move back into the green category for budget. So so far so good. Things been looking pretty well with that. With our equity position, we're in the caution category, and just to sort of highlight, this reporting is based on what we're spending, as far as from the money that's actually gone out to contractors. And we're projecting what we actually have contracted, but we haven't spent yet. We are tracking between 17 and 18% on the project overall that we have on contract. So we're hoping then this number will then kind of catch up as we spend the project. And the schedule standpoint, we did, lose some time from smoke closures that we had, some weather impacts, and some permit delays. But it's what we've moved is our phase 1 substantial completion date, which is next year, turning over the main building. But we haven't moved our final substantial completion, which is the phase 2, when we complete the track and field and the whole project is complete. So that has actually stayed true from our original contract. It's just that phase 1 has shifted a little bit, about 10 days. So we're making sure we can keep that end date steady. So I feel like we're pretty close to as planned on schedule. So overall, feeling pretty good about things right now. If there's any questions on this data, we can hold for a sec, or we can move on to some pictures.
I have a quick question, Eric. As I recall, when I was reading through the notes on the overall program, there were some concerns about Lincoln experiencing some COVID-related costs. They weren't reflected on your particular update. So I'm curious, and Marina alluded to it a little earlier about how you're starting to see it. So I'm curious, are you anticipating it to be a problem on Lincoln? And if so, what are you starting to see in terms of problems?
Sure. Well, we're not forecasting it as being a budget concern right now. I mean, within our, we talked about earlier, there was talk about risk log. I mean, in the risk log, we're definitely carrying a conservative amount that we may be, may have costs related to COVID, and we believe we can manage that within our project budget, so we wouldn't need program funds to supplement that. We've had similar costs to other projects where we've just a lot of the sort of extra safety measures we've done on site. We were sort of outside and doing a lot of groundwork when sort of the initial impacts were hitting McDaniel and Kellogg. So we didn't see some of those earlier costs that those projects did, but we're still seeing costs related to COVID impacts currently. Some on site related to workforce and getting people vaccinated, but we're actually moving towards having the contractor meet the new district requirements for vaccination of workers, which is great. Which it's a closed site, so we're not fully required to, but we got to move toward that. Really, what we're seeing is sort of the ripple effect of that, which has kind of become more of our supply chain impacts that we're tracking.
So
but we're not seeing that as a budget problem.
Yeah. But that could be you think that could be a challenge for the second phase in terms of getting that done on time?
It's possible, but our second phase is a pretty small portion of the work. We will be, I'd say we're, of the $192 million contract, construction contracts there, it's about $30 million in the phase 2. So we'll be through the sort of primary work, with the main building on phase 1. We have seen impacts, but, as other projects are doing, we're ordering materials early, we're storing materials to get them. We've been pretty nimble on changing materials that aren't available. And again, so I know I'm talking about supply chain, but we've really seen that's been kind of a ripple effect from overall COVID impacts. But so far we've been able to manage those within the project, and we're sort of allocating our risk, appropriately, that we feel like we can still manage it within our budget.
Okay, thanks. right?
Great.
So based on our earlier discussion of contingency, I want to make sure I understand it. What that 8.05% represents are your 3 buckets of contingency. Is that correct? The project contingency, the contractor's contingency, and there was one other that I forgot. Is that that's all the contingency? And as far as we're concerned, I guess as a group, we can move back and forth between those 3 buckets or not. It's limited, right? The contractor has his in the CMGC. That part's already part of his maximum price, right? But he can only get to it if you say it's okay, right? At the end of the day, if he doesn't use it, it goes back to you, right? Or does he get, yes, it goes back to you. So the money you have to play around with in terms of when you want to add a light bulb or something and change, scope changes, is really only the project amount, which is something less than 8%, right? It's the money that you would need to be concerned about. Is that right?
I have to apologize. I had a hard time hearing sort of the part of your question, but did you get that, Marina?
Yeah, I think the question was if we want to add scope, is it only able to come out of the project contingency? And the answer is no. It comes out of the owner contingency first. So we will start with the owner contingency that is within the contractor's contract. We put it in there, but again, only we have access to use it. Putting it inside the contract allows us to act more quickly to access the funding.
Great. Are there any other questions? Tom, do you have another question?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm going to use this to reemphasize my point. I think saying 8% is misleading because from my perspective, if you've built contingency into the contract, for all practical purposes, you have to assume those funds are all going to be spent. So the real contingency is something less than 8%. And to me, I'd want to know what that is. I don't want to know what those other projects, because more than likely you're going to spend all that. So it's not really a contingency because it's embedded in the contract. So that's why I think it's confusing when you report it that way. So I'll get off my soapbox. Sorry.
Is it embedded in the contract? Only the part that you put in the CMGC is embedded in the contract, right?
Right.
Is that right?
But they're saying the full contingency, including what's embedded, is 8%. And I want to know how much program contingency do you have left if the contract needs more money. That's what I'm interested in. I know and have full confidence in the staff is managing the contingency that they've negotiated in that contract, and they're doing everything they can to make sure it doesn't go over. What I really want to know from my perspective is, so what do you have in reserve if it does go over? And what capacity do you have? That's how I'd like to see contingency reported, because that's easier for me to say, yeah, the project's it's okay, or boy, if they have a problem, they may not have adequate contingency to do the program. This is saying you have 8% is misleading because you're including contingency that's in the contract. So, all right, I've said enough.
Well, perhaps I could just help with so we do have the majority of that 8%. I mean, there is still outside of our contract. So, I mean, we've been, I guess, as we've been spending the contract, say at 47%, we've spent about 43% of our contract contingencies. So we're tracking just a little bit behind that. And then there's a healthy amount that's sort of outside the contract within the project budget, but we haven't broken that out for you as what we're
right. I'm guessing it's probably
so
around 5% or something like that, which would be about right at this point in the project, which would tell me, okay, things are okay. You guys are managing it okay. So, okay.
Okay, well, here we see our latest aerial photograph. You can see there are a little bit of sort of the exterior concrete panels are going up, where you see some of the red and white on the taller portion of the building. And you can see our main gymnasium structure, and then the podium, as we call it, built around there. But as far as our progress, we're about a month away from completion of all our building rough-in, gypboard, and taping, which is great. We're also within these next few weeks, we'll be finishing our exterior glazing and getting to the point where we're dried in, probably early November, and we'll be able to take out that the tower crane, the one that's kind of in the center, that's coming out through the building. That's scheduled to come out in about a month, so that we can button up that area. And the remaining tower crane is outside of our building envelope, so we'll be able to utilize that as long as we need to. So, making good progress on the exterior and getting things buttoned up before our weather starts to turn. Well, I guess it's kind of turned a little bit already. I guess we can go to next slide. This is kind of the overall view, where you can see we're building the new building on the west end of the site. You see our laydown yard and offices, as well as staff parking. And then we have the existing Lincoln building there, which is in full operation. We opened up this fall for students and staff to return, so it's great to get them in the building and sort of seeing what we're doing and getting the students back has been good. So as you can see, then that'll be going away in our phase 2, which will start in June of next year. Once this school year is done, we'll start our demolition, abatement and demolition process. Next slide. So we're, like I said, we've been having really good progress with our interior finishing. Up in the upper left there is a model classrooms on our second floor. We've been building out that room kind of a little bit in advance of everything else, just to make sure we're fitting out everything correctly. And we're testing all of our fixtures and getting our projectors up and looking at casework and so forth. So it's really fun to see, start to see what the classroom is really going to look like. There's an image of our theater, where we just had the big sound reflectors hung up on the ceiling. We've had that whole space full of scaffolding, so they can get all that work done up above. So that scaffolding was just taken out recently, and we're just getting ready to paint inside there. We got our admin offices that are right off of the main entry, right at Salmon and 17th Avenue. So those are also, actually, those are painted now. That's a little bit older picture. And then just another image of kind of our standard sort of classroom hallway, where you can see we have glass with relights up above to allow that daylight to come in to the interior of the building. So we have our finish work, ceilings are starting to go in, light fixtures starting to go in, and our space is really starting to take shape. So here we can see like the exterior panels that we talked about. It's called UHPC, ultra high performance concrete panels. So there's a bit of a newer product material that's being used. It was just used on the new courthouse building. It was just completed at the base of the Hawthorne Bridge, but really interesting product that's going up pretty fast. Our team has been able to get to about a 30 panels per day production rate now, getting those hung up. So we should have that exterior done here in the next few weeks. You can see like our choir classroom is all gypped and taped, and they're actually painting that now. So it's just, again, just a couple of images of classrooms that are starting to take shape and really seeing the space in there. And we're getting ready to bring some of our sort of more specialty focused program area teachers to come in and start looking at their spaces to start planning for some of their equipment and materials.
And that's it on the slides.
Yes. Well, sounds like no more questions, but Tom, there you go.
One more. Not a question, a request. It looks like it's at a point where it might be a nice time for a quick tour of the progress. I kind of enjoy seeing the projects in process as much as I like seeing the completed work. But I also understand if there's some COVID-related issues that don't permit that, that would be fine. I would fine. But if there is an opportunity, I would be interested in getting a little peek at how things are coming along.
Well, we'd like to accommodate that. Certainly, we do have some restrictions. Since this is a closed site that the Hoffman Pacific Mark team is managing, that they have brought, a few groups in. We'll do that at the end of the day when the crews are gone and it's easy to kind of walk through. But I'm sure we could arrange something.
We've been spoiled. We got a chance to tour Grant and some of the other schools midway, and so and I like watching it being put together, being an engineer. So it's always an interest to me anyway. But these are different times, so not a big deal if you can't do it.
Sure.
Norm?
So the team is Bora Architects, and I think it's Hoffman Pacific Mark. How would you characterize, what is the Hoffman Pacific Mark? Is it a joint venture, or what is the relationship between the two, and how do the responsibilities break down, just roughly?
Yes, it is a joint venture. The district is actually holding the contract directly with Hoffman, and then Hoffman has created an entity in Hoffman Pacific Mark, where they are the managing body of the work, managing entity. And so, this was part of our kind of evolved within our equity plan within the project. Initially, they were bringing on Pacific Mark in the hopes of them doing a lot of performance of the work, but then looking at what they could perform and then what they would be subcontracting, didn't quite really fit some of the goals we're trying to get with participation. And so what we've done is actually brought them in from a management level and brought their staff in side by side with the Hoffman project engineers. So you have Pacific Mark project engineers and project managers, and really getting, mentoring them and managing sort of a larger scale project like this. And that's how we've been, how they've partnered in. So really, on site, it's a Hoffman Pacific Mark project, and they are running this together.
Great. That is a wonderful opportunity, I think, for Pacific Mark to get their personnel in to work closely with Hoffman, and like you said, the mentorship and sharing between the two. I'm sure they're learning stuff from each other. So that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been great. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Clark?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Clark Guide, a senior project manager that is managing the Grant Upper Field improvements, or Goofy, as we like to call them in-house. So obviously, when we look at the status of the grants, my impacts don't look great at the current time. So I'm happy to kind of touch on those as we go through here. I think my notes have explained a lot of that. Currently, our estimated completion is we're over our budgeted funds, and a lot of that is down to some increased scoping with safety netting that was added to the project after this budget was put together, that we've now kind of incorporated into our plan set. And then, as Marina discussed earlier, our market impacts have really affected our costs so far. On the equity front, it does show that we have nothing logged in yet, and it is true that we don't have anything logged in yet, but I did check in with our consultants with Bora, and they have 3 sub-consultants on board that would qualify in the MBE and WBE categories. For whatever reason, they had not logged any of that information yet. So I've encouraged them to get into our tracking system and get that information logged in so we have a better idea of where we are. Because there have definitely been payments made to those firms that would go towards this goal. Obviously, contracting, we haven't started yet, so we don't have any of those goals hit. Schedule-wise, we just recently submitted our permit set to the city to start the permitting process. We anticipate getting started in November, construction-wise on this project, and hope to have it wrapped up in time for the spring season for baseball and softball to use the field again. I think I mentioned, a couple of our accomplishments so far since probably the last time this project was reviewed. Our Type 3 land use hearing was held, and we got approval on a lot of our items. So we have some stipulations that are in there. Essentially, the reviewer agreed with most of what our design had put in place. So that was a step in the right direction. And obviously we moved forward with our design and came to our 100%. Kind of as noted, the budget issue, we're seeing a lot of escalation, a lot of price increases on some of these items from our most recent budget estimate that we had for the project, which was back in, I think, December of last year. So that coupled with adding the netting scope in kind of accounts for that overage that you see in the forecast number at this time.
And
I'd like
just
to show you like
Clark,
pretty pictures, but I don't have a lot of pretty pictures to show.
Clark, could you also just clarify? I believe the netting scope was roughly half of that overage. Is that correct?
It was, the netting scope was roughly $350,000 in total.
So the netting scope, Clark is new to you on this project. I'm going to say that very carefully. Clark joined us after the last update on this project. And he has taken on some other projects, so you've seen him at some of our other meetings, but he also shifted into the primary project manager position on this project. He was not there for the last update. At the last update, which was in, I believe, March, we did notify you that we were adding the netting scope to the project. At the time, FAM, our non-bond counterparts at PPS, were going to take on the cost of adding netting for the baseball field. Of course, we're sharing the baseball field with the softball edition, and we need netting for the softball as well. And it made most sense for that to be implemented at the same time as a cohesive solution to the netting issue. At the time, it also made sense for us to carry the cost of that because it is a bond compensable item. It would be seen as part of the project and would have been part of the project for the grant modernization itself. So we anticipated adding that cost in. We certainly have the funding to do so within the 2012 program contingency funds. But we didn't have exact costs at the time. So we were still trying to determine what the netting solution needed to be. Now, in the time since that last update, we have come up with the netting solution. We do know what those costs are. We've done everything we can to get them down, but they are what they are. And we have, on top of that, brought the contractor on board and had a reality check on the construction pricing. So that is what you're seeing as the overage. We do have funding within the 2012 program based on the estimates that we have right now. If we need additional funding for this particular project, we will be working with the FAM side of PPS with some of the funding that they have access to for construction projects. So we will cover all of the costs of this project, even if they are more than we have left in 2012, because as you probably noted from the program update in 2012, we're 99% spent. We don't have a significant amount left, but we are reserving all of that for this project at this point.
So for those of you who aren't familiar with the layout of the field, I think this was a slide that was used last time. As far as where the softball field and amenities are going to go, it hasn't really changed. This is the general layout. I think the next slide on here may be the rendering. Yeah. So this is essentially what it will look like when it's complete. This is our architect's rendering of the project. So the backstop, dugouts, bleacher sections, they all mirror the baseball side. So it's essentially the same amenities, just in the opposite corner for softball at this point. And you can see the netting system in this rendering as well. Pretty extensive.
And that's the last of the slides for this one as well.
Dick, you had a question about building it over the winter. When we prior to this, so I'm curious, Clark. Are you anticipating any challenges building it during the wet season?
Well, definitely there will be challenges building during the wet season. We have had this, the contractor we're working with to get them on board. We have had this conversation with them and have asked them to put in the time as far as anticipating any weather delays into their schedule. So they've added a little kind of buffer time in there to anticipate weather delays, but they've also told us that they do these projects all throughout the year, and they are able to continue construction during the wet weather season on fields of this nature. So
is this all artificial turf?
Correct. It's all artificial turf.
What's on the site now? Just wondering.
I'm sorry, can you say that again, Greg?
What's on the site now?
So what you're seeing is where the baseball outfield or where the softball infield is all baseball outfield. Oh. The project for the softball portion of it essentially moves that outfield fence out 20 feet. And that's how we incorporate the softball infield. So right now it's essentially what is out there now, which is just the baseball field, and the trails, the kind of the asphalt system you see there south of the softball field exists currently. We're just going to encroach on that a little bit more.
There's not a lot of regrading that has to happen.
No, there's not.
So, okay, so the winter is less of an issue.
I mean, obviously getting into and out of the site with equipment is more of our biggest concern off the U.S. Grant Place there. We're gonna have some stuff we gotta beef up and clean up to make sure we keep it usable for the wet weather time period.
Are we ready to move on to the last project update? Okay. Rolando?
Yes. Hi, this is Rolando. I'm the PM for Roosevelt High School Phase 4. Sorry, I can't. I'm kind of stuck in my car, so I'm not on camera. But first off, as far as the schedule, as far as the project goes, it's going fairly well. We're about like what I say, 60. What I say here, 69%, 70% done, completed. The unfortunate thing is with our schedule, we got kind of caught in a few delays with the weather delay that we had, and then we had the heat delay, and then we had the smoke, and all kinds of stuff. So that kind of pushed us back a bit. And we're working with the school on trying to get them to use what we've got going, what we took away from them at the beginning of the project, which is the auditorium, and because we were joining to that we're adjoining to the back of that building. But we got through the summer and got all the tenant improvement that they needed, and got the auditorium back to them. We're also working with them with a partition wall that is, as well as it's delayed due to some mishap on material delays and late incoming, all the COVID related delays that's been happening. And of course, when all the mandates came in, that also kind of slowed us down a little bit. But I think we've worked it out to where hopefully by Thanksgiving we'll be done and have the building to them on the next coming semester. And they'll be able to use that building. So the shop will be moving the shop into the new space, moving the maker space into where the shop used to be, and then opening up the 4 classrooms up top. And we're really working closely with the school on that, and we're kind of lucky that they're pretty understanding of the delays that were happening. So, but so far so good on that aspect. Let's see what else. Unfortunately, I can't see very well. All the it's a small print. I'm sorry.
Rolando, can you speak to the equity numbers?
Yeah. The equity numbers. We've been kind of working on that closely with the contractor. Unfortunately, right now, we're not sitting very well consultant-wise. We're pretty good at, well, we're at 1.79. And with the contractors, we've been having some issues with trying to find the qualified contractors that could fit, that could work with Todd, and have been kind of working with us closely on that. That's our numbers are fairly low on that. But overall wise, we've been kind of pushing on them real hard to get that up. We've been kind of up and down between, looks like we've settled to about 0.8% so far.
So I think Kenichi has a question.
I'm sorry?
I have a question, Rolando.
Sure.
I'm curious about the outreach methods that Todd and Bassetti have used, because what's a really strong correlation through these presentations are the construction firms that we see out in the community, the trade associations like myself and people who are kind of at the intersection of equity and construction don't have the same numbers that some of the construction firms that I'm seeing here that are not so engaged in doing outreach in the community. Todd Construction and Bassetti Architects are two that I can say that I don't see out in the community. So I'm curious about what their outreach methods has been in trying to get firms involved in this work.
We work with them with some can't find the word for this. What was it? Some organizations that
Kenichi, I think.
I'm sorry.
Hey, Rolando, I'm going to step in real quick because you're cutting in and out. I think, Kenichi, it would probably be good for us to ask those two firms to provide us information about what outreach they have done. But I do want to note that we have worked with Todd on both this project and the Kellogg project. They were also on Fabian. So they've done other work with the district, but most recently this and Kellogg. And both of those projects were lump sum projects. So they were both low bid, which does hamper their ability to direct work towards certified firms. However, it does not mean that they should be doing less outreach in an attempt to get as many certified business contractors to bid on the work. So I think it's a great question that you've asked, and we will certainly reach out to both of those firms and ask them to provide us with more information about the types of outreach that they do to get certified business partners in their contract work. And Director Hollins, I believe you have a question too.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, it's a bit concerning. You know, as I look at the equity numbers throughout McDaniels, Lincoln, Grant, Upperfield, now Roosevelt, it seems like every report we're getting, the numbers is getting worse and worse. And you know, I'm gonna push back a little bit on the premise of, you know, low bids, lump sum bids makes it harder for contractors to reach out to minority firms. I've been on, our firm has been on a number of contracts that is lump sum bids with other agencies that were low bid, and I don't think it's necessarily a hindrance for contractors to reach out. I think they have to be intentional and willing to reach out. We worked on projects from Nike project, Intel DIY projects, to light rail projects, to even the Randall Children's Hospital. So I don't think it's necessarily, I'm gonna push back 100% on this, not the fact that there's a lump sum bid that hinders or makes it more difficult for contractors to use minority firms. I think it's just more about the intentionality of them using those firms, and also there's no consequences if they don't. And that's one of the issues that, as a minority firm, it's been raised up for years, is that I get we have equity, we got equity right under budget, and that's great, and those are the numbers, but there is no consequence, or there is no recall for when a contractor do not do this. We look at it and say, oh, we should do better. But then once again, like you just said, that you guys use Todd Construction on other projects. And I would love to see what those, like Kellogg, I didn't look at the Kellogg's numbers, but I would like to see what those equity numbers was on those companies that used before, and see, so if we're using them before and their equity numbers are not good, why are we using them again? And that's just kind of my thought on that. Thank you.
When they're a low bid procurement method, we're required to use the lowest bidder. So just understand that our hands are tied in many respects with those low bid projects as well. So yeah, we've had a lengthy series of discussions in a lot of different forums, and we will continue to have those conversations. We've been walking this through with many members of the board in the previous iteration of the School Improvement Bond Committee, again, moving forward into the Facilities and Operations Committee. We will continue to walk it through with the BAC as well. And I think the rest of the BAC members can attest that we've had many, many conversations about the equity numbers. And again, just a reminder for everybody, the numbers that you see on reports are based on payments made, not on what is contracted. So we've had that conversation as well. We are certainly looking at other options to try to track contracted amounts But given where we've been with the pandemic, it's probably not been our highest priority to figure out how to report out on contracts versus payments made, which we have a system already in place. So
yeah, and I get what you're saying, but there are other agencies that uses low bid as well. It's not just PPS that use the low bid process. And those those other agencies have been more intentional in making sure that their GMGCs are using minority contractors. So I don't want to, and I'm new coming in here with this process, but as far as the construction stuff, I've been around it for over 20 years. I've talked with companies from Colis to Rainmore to James Posey, who's been around it a lot longer, 40, 50 years. And so these are the same conversations that were had even then. So I don't want us to excuse, saying, well, it's a low bid and our hands are tied. No, as an owner, we have authority to put things in place, just like TriMet has done. And I can give you these information, the things that they've done. TriMet has done, ODOT has done. So there's things that we can do. So I disagree with our hands are tied piece. I think we just have to be really intentional on how we do our contracting. Thank you.
So I see Tom's hand is up, and I wanted to just some notes, Marina. The last conversation that we had around this, I do remember how robust it was in March, and I think one of the things that we had put on the table as a presentation tool is the project manager, if because we are looking at payments, coming a little bit more prepared with these are the we know that you're looking at a zero, right? It's like you go into it knowing that this is a hot button that will be asked. So these are the outreach methods. Just a little bit more preparation on some of the drivers of the numbers, so that we don't, so you can address it up front and we don't end up. It's just, I know intellectually that conversation and the fact that it's low bid, they're, like Mr. Holland said, there are minority contractors that function and thrive in a low bid environment. My kind of flag here is that I've just been noticing a trend throughout the evening that the folks that I don't see them as engaged in the community are the ones that have kind of these lower scores. And when we do have this type presentation where we're looking at zeros, I think there are 2 or 3 key things that I would appreciate seeing: what the outreach plan was, that the contractor should submit that to the program manager before they come to the BAC, and if kind of like the presentation before, if there is an MBE, WBE that was involved in the project, but that name is not showing up, or that percentage is not showing up, coming with the name and the dollar amount, just some mitigations or explanations. So because the numbers, we can read the numbers. So what we want to see is the story behind the numbers.
Understood. We will look at what we can provide for the next meeting.
I just want to comment also. I think Kenichi said that's a great call out. It's sometimes they're doing everything they can, it just doesn't work out. But if they're not doing anything, that's what we want to understand, and I think that's what you're concerned about. So I would also like to comment that I worked for another public agency for many, many years and am well aware of the challenges. And I think you have to be careful about comparing agencies because of, for one thing, disparity studies. We had a disparity study done at the port. I suspect TriMet has one. And so we had way more effect there are more consequences if contractors weren't doing a good faith effort to go out and solicit. And we've had this just here as background. We've had this conversation before about whether the school district should pursue that because, but there is some debate as to whether they work better or not. I know from my own experience at the port, we had much better leverage over hard bid contractors when we could set goals and disqualifying if they didn't do a good faith effort. Unfortunately, the school district doesn't have that right now. So that's when Marina said her hands are tied. It's a little more difficult for them since they haven't done that. So that might be something that you may want to take up with the board as something for the board to consider, because I know it worked at the port. So anyway, for what it's worth.
If it's okay, we would like to share some photos from the project.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, Rolando, I do believe Sunny is also on the call. Would you like Sunny to go through the photos since he can see them better?
Yeah, he's more on the ground than I am over there. I think he would.
Yeah, hi. I can go, Rolando. We can make this quick for everybody. I'm Sonny Rose. I'm the CM working with Rolando on the Roosevelt Phase 4 project. Just a quick summary of, for those that don't know, what we've been doing here is we've been adding about a 10,000 2-story square foot building addition onto the existing north wing of the building, and that has created all sorts of challenges. We started when there was a completely unoccupied site during COVID. It then became an occupied site when school went back into session last year. It then became an unoccupied site over the summer. It's now again become an occupied site in September when school started. So we've had all sorts of challenges and delays that have been related to that. Contractors doing their best. We're doing our best to work through those issues. We're moving towards a substantial completion here, hopefully in a TCO in November. That will open this building back up as Rolando, or open this building up. As Rolando mentioned, the goal is to get the school in the new building after the Thanksgiving break. So just a couple photos here. What you see here is the building going up. These were taken last week. That's the east side up there, east side of the building on North Ida Avenue. The ground floor, there's a couple interior photos, but the ground floor is the new CTE wood shop, and the upstairs floor is four new classrooms. This is what it looks like on the west side. That big opening there is the overhead door opening into the new CTE shop. Lower right there, you can see into the new CTE shop. Still a lot of activity going on, obviously. We're in the finishes stage of the project. A lot of HVAC and other finished work happening. To the left up there, that is the teaching wall where James Duckwell, who's the CTE teacher, will be conducting many sessions of his class. Lower right there is the new all-user restroom. So these will be similar to what's at Grant and what's being put in at Lincoln. This will be the only all-user bathroom in Roosevelt. Obviously, the finishes aren't up there yet. This is upstairs in the new classrooms being built out. You can see how far along they are, working on finishes, working on putting the ceilings. The lower right corner there is two of the classrooms actually. So two of the classrooms will have an operable partition wall installed, so that the school has a little more flexibility in the space. The other two classrooms are just single classrooms. I think that's the last slide.
That's the last slide.
Great.
If there are no additional questions on Roosevelt Phase 4, we can move on to the review of the BAC Charter. Thank you, Sunny. Thank you, Rolando.
Thank you, everyone.
And I'm going to turn this over to Dan.
Okay, I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to cruise through this. We want to do a quick overview of the BAC Charter. Most of you will recall that we covered most of this material at our January retreat and again at our March meeting, but it's always good to do a quick refresh. So I'm going to cruise through, but feel free to stop me if you have any questions or comments along the way. So this slide is our level of detail graphic. And really it's not, it's a bit of an oversimplification, but I think it's a helpful illustration. Starting at the bottom and working up, PPS staff, not surprisingly, spends the most time with bond projects and program, and therefore have the most information and detail, and are ultimately responsible for bond projects and programs. So there at the bottom, you see that large, the largest, I guess, width there. That's the most detail, obviously spends the most amount of time on these projects. And BAC members are, of course, not responsible for outcomes of projects. Moving up, the district has a variety of auditors, including contract auditors, financial auditors, and performance auditors, all who dig into various scope of work details. Auditors spend many hundreds of hours working on audits and thus are able to provide a detailed insight into limited functions and activities related to the bond program. BAC members are, of course, not expected to act in a capacity similar to our auditors. The BAC does, however, have a very broad reporting purview, namely the entire bond program and all bond programs. And because of this comprehensive scope, the expectation is that BAC's reporting is generally high level, wide reaching, and provides a broad overview of the program and how it's tracking against the voter approvals. Next slide, please. This just is intended to illustrate the importance of alignment. The BAC Charter outlines what the BAC's charge and objectives are. The Charter obligates the BAC to produce specific deliverables, and those deliverables are informed by staff-provided materials. The BAC's charge primarily is to monitor progress against progress of the bond against the voter-approved scope, schedule, and budget. That's pretty straightforward. Next, please. There we go. So specifically, what's being monitored? These are the boxes there are directly out of the charter that we're pointing there. So the primary items that the BAC monitors are reviewing if the bond funds are being spent on voter-approved bond scope and not being spent on other non-bond projects or activities. Reviewing if there are sufficient funds in the overall program to complete the scope that is in the voter-approved bond. Reviewing if projects are meeting the scope of work approved by the voters, and reviewing that projects are being completed in a time anticipated and approved by the voters. Next, please. Deliverables. So the BAC has three primary deliverables: one, regular reporting to the board; two, providing feedback and advice to the board; and three, providing feedback and advice to staff. And we'll touch on each one of those very quickly, and then we will wrap up. So the first one, regular updates. The BAC reports regularly to the board or the board subcommittee, as it is in its current format. The reporting to the board should align with the specific charge and objectives that are outlined in the charter. It is based on materials that is provided by staff, and reporting provides general compliance on the purpose set forth in the capital improvement programs as approved by the voters. Next. The BAC also offers recommendations to the board. So on occasion, the board may request the BAC's opinion on specific topics, or the BAC may suggest topics. And because these require additional time and effort on the BAC members and often require specialized information, they should be agreed upon by the board and the BAC. Director Hollins, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I get it clear. So the committee that they report to is at the facilities and
correct. That is your committee.
Gotcha. Okay.
Why we invite you to these too.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. And then the last slide is similarly, staff sometimes request the BAC to opine on specific topics, or the BAC may want to have a specific discussion topic. And so those are the topics that we schedule in our work plan as what we call our special items. So went through that as quickly as I could. Are there any questions or comments?
Well, I don't know if you saw the email exchange, but I had requested BAC to review the charter, updated charter, and offer any comments prior to the meeting, knowing we were probably going to run long, and I wanted to kind of get the conversation started earlier. And Dick, in his typical fashion, did a great job sharing his thoughts with the rest of us. I think the takeaway for some of us is we're still, and it kind of came up in the conversation about the contingency. I think part of it is trying to find that right level of reporting for us to be satisfied that we're receiving information in a timely enough manner to be able to say we're meeting the intent of our charter. That seems to have been part of some of the concerns in the past, which is why I kept pushing, have we had the charter updated and so forth. So I don't know, Dick, do you want to jump in? You had a number of comments. I don't want to steal your thunder. Are you there?
Yeah. Well, everybody saw the questions, right? Do you want me to read the questions back?
Well, maybe Dan and Gary aren't aware of the questions since they weren't part of the email exchange. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind, real quick.
Okay. Well, the first point I made was because I wasn't able to see the program level financials, I was concerned about that with our duty to report regularly to the board about whether the program, and there are 3 now, bond programs, would be able to deliver the agreed upon scope. I guess I just want to amend that by saying I was disappointed that we didn't get the materials for this meeting a week in advance like we'd been asking, and getting them as late as we did is kind of a problem. And I didn't even know that a whole lot of the materials that we saw today were even available until the meeting. So it's really hard to digest them and think about them in advance. One specific thing that I had mentioned that's been kind of gnawing on me, I guess, from the beginning, and it's not new language in the amended charter. It existed before, and it's just sort of been set aside. And I'm a little concerned about it because I think it is important. And the charter contains language about applying the racial equity and social justice framework and so forth in any recommendation that the BAC makes to the board. I think that's important. I understand there's a important value there. I don't know how to do that in the context of the bond projects and physical facilities. I mean, I understand there are all kinds of other dimensions to that. I poked around on the web page a little bit, the district's web page, and saw stuff about search and seizure and so forth, and I get all that, but I don't think that's related to the lens that we need regarding facilities. And so and maybe I'm just speaking for myself here, not necessarily all of the bond committee the BAC members, but I know that I would need some more background information from staff about those topics in the context of physical projects and how to apply those principles, in any recommendation that we might make to the board. I don't know how to do that right now, frankly.
I'd jump in. I had the same thought when I read the charter. It's like, okay, what does that framework mean? I get the social equity as it relates to contracting and how are we doing with creating opportunities within the community to bid on the work, or making sure there's adequate opportunities for construction contractors and staff to get all that. The other piece of it, though, like Dick, it's like, okay, well, what does that mean from a design of the building, for example, and things like that. So I think that would be useful for me as well to kind of understand, what do you mean by that framework? Is it apply to contracting, or does it apply to the whole gamut of things that we look at when we review these projects, from beginning to end? So that was I had a similar reaction, Dick. Just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great item to add to the work plan, that we could bring some of our staff and bring some comments and provide some level of training about how the BAC might be able to utilize our ResJ lens. Angela, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I think for me, like I've had a number of questions that I've raised about visibility of an issue that I think there's a commitment in the bond that every school will be accessible on the first floor. That work hasn't started. That work's not showing up. That conversation's not happening. And it makes me think about, ableism and racism. When we start talking about this, it's not just what will we report. It's like, how will we hold ourselves accountable? It makes me wonder who in the staff has a disability that's in a core decision-making role. Who in the staff are from the communities that we see underrepresented in contracts. So it asks questions on a number of levels, but I think it also requires us to maybe have a checklist. Where is it? Is it visible, or does it need a yeah, but? If I'm not on the call bringing a disability perspective, does it get raised? The same as like, what's my responsibility as a white woman with privilege to think of those questions as we are looking at each dimension. So I think there's something fundamental I'm not yet seeing addressed in the information that we always get. And it came up today, and I felt a good conversation, but even in things like, where's the photos that show one person with a disability? Where's the photos when you show the steps up to the second floor gym? Show me the elevator. So I'm bring pieces of that, but I'd like to see it start breathing in to the processes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's a great comment as well. Our accessibility improvements are a part of our infrastructure updates. And so I think we can certainly have conversations whenever it's appropriate. And I always appreciate the comments, Angela, that you bring up as we go through individual projects or whatever it might be. But when we do our infrastructure updates, we will bring the staff and have the conversation specific about those accessibility projects that are funded by the bond. But again, I don't by any means mean to limit the further discussion about highlighting accessibility in all of our projects.
Yeah, and if I might kind of add on to Angela's comment, one other takeaway that I had, it kind of came out tonight with some of the other comments from the board. I think what would be helpful, particularly for some of the newer members who haven't been around to see how the whole project has evolved, like I have. So there's a lot of aspects of the project that I take for granted because I was there from the beginning. Not everyone has that benefit. And so to the extent we can, when we're talking about projects and we're getting updates, to the extent we can highlight some of the things that the project's doing that are listed in the charter that we're supposed to be oversight, I think that would be helpful for us, because that would help then for us to say, yeah, they are working towards achieving these goals. And so, you do a great job of reporting all the contracting, all that other kind of stuff. But I think it's also important, like Angela alluded to earlier, okay, when the new school opened up, how well does it work for people with disabilities? What are some innovative things that have been we've done in this school to improve the energy conservation or whatever, but not to forget about these other things, because seems like we always have this kind of influx of new people coming in that don't have the benefit of all the history like I do. So to the extent we can think about that as well as when we're talking and presenting, I think that would be useful as well. It's just an observation that I have from reading the charter again. So.
No, Tom, I love that one, because we really, as we talked about alignment, we want the charter, the materials, and the reporting and our discussions to be aligned. And we talk about how they need to be, because of the breadth, because of the amount of work that happens in between these meetings, and the hundreds of staff that are working on these projects, it's going to be high level. But the charter does call out these specific things that we want to make sure we hit on, and sometimes it's a challenge to do that. So I think it's a great point of the charter calls out some specifically how are we aligning with historic preservation, accessibility, there's other things. Let's hit on those when we talk about our project updates. I think that's a great way to do it. I think it'll help the committee be able to report and say, look, I'm doing what you asked me to do in the charter.
Any other comments from the BAC members? Guess not. Let's move on.
I'm going to leave it to you to manage this piece. This is the last piece. We are over time, so
This
do this at your
this shouldn't
discretion.
take very long. Yeah, this shouldn't take very long. It occurred to me, and I'm on just coincidentally, I'm on another commission that's been meeting virtually, and we haven't moved back to in-person meetings, but there's kind of mixed feelings on the commission about going back to meetings, in-person meetings. And I had the benefit of, because I had a conflict of when I did my report to the facilities operations, I have that right, committee, I did it virtually, which, I didn't really want to do it that way, but I had a conflict and it worked out for me to be able to do it. And so it was, I have to admit, well, that was nice that I was able to do that. And so the question then becomes, how do we want to approach this from the BAC's perspective? Now, we don't have the same priority as the board does. So if we have a meeting that conflicts with the board, we may not be able to do a combined in-person and virtual meeting. And so, so like tonight, well, we're doing it virtually again, even though many of us probably would have preferred to do it in person. But I wanted to kind of get some feedback from the rest of the members to kind of hear your thoughts, your views as to how you think this will work going forward. So we can provide some guidance to Marina and specific staff on how to want to host these. So I'll turn it over. Greg, you got a comment?
I do. Thank you. I can appreciate the virtual format. It means I can eat my dinner and walk into this room, and I don't have to get in my car and go somewhere. But the fact is, aside from you, Tom, and Dick, I do not know anybody on this committee. And when I say know anybody, I haven't talked to anybody. I haven't had sidebar conversations with anybody. I don't have a feel for really where you're coming from at times. I can't advocate. And I can't brainstorm as easy. I think virtual meetings work great. If you just follow an agenda, you get things done. But the fact is, you can't, to me, brainstorming, meeting people, having that conversation is frankly one of the reasons I join these things to help, but also is the way I think we can do better business. Now, some people don't want to do that. Maybe we have them combined. I know some committees I'm involved with, they're doing both virtual and in person. One that I chair did both. It worked for those that want to come. But to me, I just don't know the people on the committee except for you and Dick, because I've known you guys for years.
Angela?
With my work, and I'm working with OHA on vaccine stuff all the time, I think we have to know that we've all become our own personal risk managers, and we have to find ways that we can just honor what people's needs are. Like I have someone in my family that's 12 times more likely to die if they catch COVID, so it impacts me. And I just feel like, could that capacity be increased so there is the option for people to choose? Because to not have a choice is really difficult. So what needs to happen capacity-wise to honor that? And then also there are questions I'd want to ask, like the other week, my husband's on another board. We went to the meetings, we went to the outdoor golf, we didn't go to the cocktails and we didn't go to the dinners. Like, ways that people could accommodate their needs. But I agree, I was really missing I'm a community grassroots gal. I need to talk with people. I need to be with people. So I think we are missing a whole dimension of what the capacity of this group is if we can't meet. But I think we should be extremely flexible and make sure that our communications, because I know those people who they really, really are high risk. And I can't presume there isn't somebody in this group that's got an autoimmune condition. So I just caution that we are kind, but we also look for the flexibility that really this time's requiring. And I would like to see how could PPS perhaps look at capacity so that we can make a choice.
Okay. Dick, you had raised your hand, I think.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, I thought those comments are very important, and flexibility certainly during these times is important. I do share Greg's view that in-person meetings, when we can do them, are a lot more effective than simply virtual meetings, especially with a group that hasn't had a chance to come together and gel, as a group. Once you have all kinds of relationships, it's easier to, I think, have virtual meetings. But for us, it's a challenge. We have to be mindful about what's possible and what's safe right now.
Anyone else want to weigh in, or is it?
I'll just say I agree with Angela and Dick's comments and yours. I think we need to have that flexibility. I think if it was just all in-person meeting, we're not going to have that great of attendance potentially. So if we can have an in-person with the option to video in, we can make that work. That would be ideal, given the circumstances.
Darren, you had a question, or you want to comment?
I don't see any reason we can't hold an in-person and virtual meeting and allow individuals to weigh in from a virtual space while we also hold an in-person meeting.
Okay. So the question I have kind of goes back to the district then. If this is, everyone I think is in agreement that a combination is really the best approach. We lead, to Angela's point, give people a choice because of their varying circumstances that they're dealing with, which I whole support as well. So the question then becomes, can the district do this? Or do we have to think about scheduling our meetings at a time where we don't conflict with other board meetings or other things that have a higher priority for the resources needed to provide these in-person virtual combination meetings? So just a thought. That's kind of my question. Dan or Marina, you want to tackle that one?
Yes. I mean, one of the things that came up with this particular meeting was that the new vaccination requirements.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up.
Because we would have students in the McDaniel buildings during the time of the meeting, it would have required that anyone who came to the BAC meeting be vaccinated. That was we weren't sure for quite a while how this was going to work. So when we discovered that was the case, we didn't know if we could turn it around quickly enough to make sure that everybody could attend. And we also knew that we were not capable of putting together a hybrid option that quickly either. So we do have some limitations on within OSM on how we support all of this technology. We're great construction managers. We are not great IT people. So we do need to figure out how to make that work from a technology perspective. Not just the simple things of like patching people in, but actually managing people who are coming in hybrid, doing a presentation, ensuring that the live stream is coordinated, and talking to people in person. We just need to kind of figure out what our gameplay is to get there and do it. So we do hear that this is something that's important to you. We will say that it would be significantly easier to do this at the BSC because of the vaccination requirement. With that in mind, though, if we're going to do it at the BESC, then we definitely do want to coordinate with other board groups.
Right? Yes. Great.
Well, I only comment that I'm chair of a citizen committee that is doing exactly what you're talking about, and it just didn't seem that hard. I mean, it wasn't very difficult at all for them to have us come in person. I chair the committee, and the people that couldn't were on a big screen on the wall, and just as we are here in this room, I can call on them, and I can call on the people in the room, and it was, honestly, it was easy. So maybe I'm making too little out of it, but it was not difficult at all.
I will definitely hand over the reins to you on the next one, Greg. It sounds like you've got it all figured out.
One thing I noticed when I was participating in the meeting is that it looked like all of the board members had a laptop in front of them. And so I was wondering, when I was being virtual, was I on a big screen or was I on their little laptop? And so I was thinking, is there some kind of a hybrid approach where if you're able to get on Wi-Fi, it's a Zoom meeting in a sense, everyone's at the table with their computer so they can hear everyone, but at the same time, we're all in the same room together, or those that can be in the same room. Is there an option like that? Or I'm guessing the live streaming is a problem. So I understand that, but I'm just curious as well. Is there some way we can figure out a way to do it, or we're not as dependent on IT staff? Just a thought.
It's all things that we need time to look into and to coordinate with the central office staff that support these types of activities. So many things are possible, but the details of that I couldn't tell you tonight. And we were not able to make it work specifically for today's meeting.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Okay.
It sounds like we're going to get some more info. I mean, I run a pretty small nonprofit. I've been an old dog learning all kinds of new tricks. We've done bilingual, we've done people in virtual and in person, whatever. The technology is available. It's got a lot simpler than it was. So it may be that as we presented our ideal, that Marina, there may be people that can help. And I know how terrible it feels if you're the one that doesn't know how it works and you're responsible and that slide doesn't go up. So I'm not minimizing that there's pieces that need to be in place, and I appreciate that. But I do think that it shouldn't be that problematic if we've clearly expressed how we'd like it to be. Can we take that away and trust that you'll figure out the best solution and bring something back to us? And I appreciate that that might take you a little bit of time.
Certainly. As I said, I heard very clearly that you are looking for a hybrid solution, and we will go and figure out what we can do. We were not able to make it happen for tonight, given the short amount of time, and we need to figure out what our plan is to make it work for the next time.
Okay. All right. Anyone have any other comments? We went a little bit long tonight. Greg, looks like you raised your hand.
Yeah, so when is our next meeting? Is it November 30th or whatever?
There you go. November 22nd.
Well, our next official meeting is November 22nd, correct? But we may have another meeting in between because we weren't able to cover Benson tonight. And so I think sometime next month, hopefully we can squeeze that in and not try to tag it on to November. That's the current plan. So hopefully folks can accommodate a meeting again next month. So fortunately, it won't be 2 hours because it's just Benson.
I do want to note too that November 22nd is a Monday. It's not a Wednesday meeting because, of course, that Wednesday is the 24th, which is the day before Thanksgiving. We didn't think people would want to spend their evening before Thanksgiving talking about
still.
projects.
I can't think of anything better to do.
So we had shifted that forward when we were planning out the meetings for this year. It should be on your calendars as a hold. We are open to having conversations about moving the time earlier in the day as well. So something to consider as we go back. Not tonight. I don't know that we need to have that additional discussion tonight, but we have said, to ourselves, does this have to be at 5:30? Can these meetings occur during the day or earlier, but not necessarily like in the middle of the day? So something to think about so we can discuss it next time.
Dick, you had a question?
Not a question. I just had a kind of another overall comment. We didn't really talk about the health and safety program, although there was a slide in the or a report in there, and I don't think we need to go through the 100 or so line items there. But looking at that, it made me reflect back on what I'd heard from board members before, asking for some summary level information to be developed so that the public could be informed really on what I've heard them say is a school by school basis, what the progress has been to, address the lead paint issue, the asbestos issue, whatever the issue, issues are at a particular school, how far along are we in executing those, and is there some way to put together a summary high-level report that captures the essence of that? And it seems like, I don't know if the BAC can help brainstorm some ideas there or whatever, but that seems to be a request from the board that I'm not sure is being addressed yet.
So just to note, we do provide the health and safety funding allocation report every time, just like we do the bond program status updates. Even though the specific report out on individual projects within the health and safety 2017 allocation is done at a different meeting. So we did the 2017 health and safety and the 2020 infrastructure at the same meeting in, I want to say it was in May this year.
But I think we're talking past each other, Marina. I'm thinking of something. What I think I hear the board saying is, here's a school. It had this universe of asbestos remediation that was needed to be done. The 2012 bond program did 10% of it. The 2017 bond program has done another 70% of it, and the 2017, the current bond program is going to do the rest, or something like that.
Yeah, I do, and I just hadn't had a chance to get to that portion of your question. I did want to just kind of clarify the report that was in there. Yes, I understood the question. The bond program is not the only part of PPS that addresses facility defects. So this is much bigger than just the bond, even though the bond does invest a substantial amount of money into addressing those defects and has, in fact, most of those bond measures have been set up to do so. But we're not the only department that manages those projects. And we also don't manage the condition assessment log, if you will. So I think that is a much, much bigger conversation. It's definitely not just OSM. And I think it's probably more than we can get into here, but I think we can go back and have some internal conversation about that and potentially try to respond to that either between now and the next meeting or at the next meeting.
Okay, any other comments? Gary, thanks for joining us tonight. Appreciate your input. And I expect we'll see your smiling face at a few more of these meetings in the future. With that, I guess we're adjourned, and we'll just wait to hear from Marina as to when and if we're going to meet next month on Benson. Thanks everyone for hanging around so long. Good conversation. I'll try to put together some notes, and I'll share them with the rest of you for your comments for our report. So have a nice evening, all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Night.